What's up, folks? It's Big Boy here, coming to you live at Arena Fighting Championships at All Sports Arena in Newport Richey, where we're going to see some of the best live amateur MMA fighting to tell you about. Matt Gaither here, the main cage zombie, our main commentator, and the guy we always have to have at the MMA fights. He's going to tell you a little bit about what we got going on.
Well, what we've got is some guys that are going to be coming out and leaving it all in the cage, whether they're making debuts, whether they're veterans that have been doing this for a little while. We're just going to see a lot of fighters step in this cage tonight that are going to be here to put on a great show.
Over a dozen fights, but we have titles. These amateurs have worked hard, and we've got about 4 fights that I really want to feature, some fighters that I really want to talk about. Want to start out at the top with our main event with Brandon Lewis versus Andrew Poole. These are 2 young guys that are 125 pounds, both of them under 20 years old. These guys have been in the business for a while. Brandon Lewis has been out of state, fought a couple times as an underage amateur. Now he's here, over 18. This is going to be his last amateur fight, and he's defending his title against Andrew Poole.
Yeah, I mean, the first fight was a great fight. It's had so much build up to it. It was really like a great anticipated fight, probably one of the best hyped fights in AFC history, and the fight ended rather quickly, with the split eyebrow, which is something that is always a shame to see in the amateurs, but glad that the rematch was able to happen because Brandon had already set on going pro, and Andrew wanted the rematch, AFC wanted the rematch, everybody wanted it to happen. Brandon said, okay, I'll hang out for a minute, I'll stay amateur, we'll make this rematch happen. And hopefully they're going to put on the fight that everybody wants to see tonight.
Yeah, that first round with Andrew and Brandon was pretty even, and that unfortunate cut above the eye came, and the fight was forced to stop due to the fighters' safety. We got to worry about it. These guys are amateurs. We don't need something that's going to hurt them worse. Now we get to see this amazing rematch.
Yeah.
Now on to the 170-pound title, where we got Brian Panizio versus Florida State Wrestling Champion Sean Brown. Now, Sean Brown's out of Team Arsenal with Josh Goins, and these guys always bring it to fight. Panizio, Paul Rodriguez, ATT. We saw Matt Ferriola last night fight a tough fight with Ladarius Jackson. I'm looking forward to seeing this camp. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, that ATT Orlando crew always comes out and puts on great shows. Their guys are always ready. The Team Arsenal guys, man, those guys coming out of the woodworks there in that North Florida area, those guys are some tough young dudes. Sean Brown's come out here and put on some great fights. I mean, 2 or 3 events ago when he stepped up on like a last-minute notice to fight somebody and came out, put on a great show. So I expect to see some big things from both of those guys.
Yeah, Panizio is one of my favorite fighters. He's a very animated fighter, likes to move around, likes to play in there. But hey, it's working for the kid. The crowd loves it. He's winning fights. So let's see if we can't see if Panizio can't continue his win. Now on to the 145-pound title, where our fan favorite here at AFC, Mikhail Hawaii Ferguson, will be fighting Robert Russell out of Team Arsenal. Another guy coming in here from Goins camp. They got Brad Taylor up there. That's a strong camp. I can't wait to see this fight.
It's another one where, Hawaii was ready to go pro. He was on the verge of turning pro, but wanted to get one more amateur fight in there before going. And he's just continued to improve. I know he's working, he's worked over with the Tigers World Tampa. He's worked some with the Death War Dark Side guys. So he's definitely got a good mixture of his training in and been able to really elevate his game a little bit there. I think taking this one last amateur fight was a good move for Hawaii. And, of course, another guy coming out of that Team Arsenal. We're going to see some good stuff from him because those guys train hard up there. Not much else to do in North Florida out there in the woods. So spend all their time training and getting better and better, and some real good fighters that come out of that camp.
As a coach, Mikhail Ferguson is mine. A lot of people know this kid's come up from nothing. This kid came up from the streets, worked up, was at the gym every day, cleaning toilets, doing everything. The kid wanted to do it to the point to where when I left the gym and wasn't working there, he's taken over. Now he's working at Tigers World. Now he's fighting. Now he's making his pro debut, but got hurt. Was out for a few months nursing that injury. Now it's time to take one more amateur. Maybe in July we see Mikhail Ferguson against Jamal Thorne in the RFC. We'll see what happens. A lot of great fights at the AFC tonight. There's a few more. Matt's got a great list. Let's even look at this list.
About that heavyweight fight.
The heavyweight fight. Rashawn Jackson, bringing it in here. This kid is amazing. He's a champion.
Might not be human.
Might not. What do you know about him?
He's a tough dude. I know he recently traveled internationally and did some competitions there in different form of martial arts and won the championship there. I don't know if it was a gold medal, or I know that he came back with a pretty stellar performance there. Undefeated, finished most of his opponents. I think all but one of his opponents have been finished. So he's a tough dude. He's a tough guy to stand across the cage from. I couldn't imagine doing it. I've seen a lot of different amateur heavyweights stand across the cage from the guy, and he's a tough dude to look at and to have a confidence in yourself over. So we'll see of this opponent tonight. He comes out of Grady's MMA. Grady's MMA are no slouches. Great school there with a great coach. Don Grady is a standout dude. So I expect to see a great fight from both of those guys, and a fight that really is up in the air at this point. Probably the best opponent Action Jackson has faced to this point.
You know, we've had the whole heavyweight scene come and go. These amateurs have to have 5 fights before they go pro here in the state of Florida. So they try to get in 5, and most of them might get in more. You know, it's just up to the fighter and the coach. Rashawn Jackson, and we had a one-time heavyweight amateur, Oleg Kervinsky.
Yeah.
We seen him fight last night at the RFC Professional, won his first pro fight, unfortunately lost his other one. Rashawn Jackson and Oleg was supposed to happen. Maybe we can see that in the pros once Rashawn's ready to go pro. What would you like to see about that fight?
I think that's a heavy fight. I think they need to reinforce the cage on that one. Those are 2 very large dudes, so I think that'd be a great fight, though. You know, Oleg started the fight out great last night. Drew Stewart just happened to catch him. Got him in a tough spot, and Drew finished the fight. But Oleg's a really tough fighter, and comes out of that team Darkside there, where we've just seen Dervin Lopez coming off of a KO victory. So those guys are top notch over at Darkside. So I know that Action Jackson, Rashawn, I know he does a lot of good top level training. I know he gets around a little bit, trains a couple different spots. So I think that'd be a great fight to see. Be a great way to welcome Rashawn into the pros, and a great way for Oleg to rebound and get back to a tough fight.
Now, on to Brandon Lewis. We talked a little bit about him prior in the beginning, but he's actually going pro as well, set to fight in July, signed a 4-fight deal with the RFC and Joe Valdez, so we're excited to see him go pro. What are your expectations from this young man they kind of call the Sage Northcutt of Florida MMA?
I'm just about to say the same thing. He's a tough young kid who was fortunate enough to get a lot of experience at a young age. You don't really see that all that often. You don't see people. You know, he was a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid going up to Virginia, fighting against 25, 35-year-old men that have been doing this for a long time, that have been fighting, have way more experience than him. The fact is, he just is a tough kid. He's tough training. You know, he was training with Superman's MMA for quite some time. He got around to a few different schools, but I think he's found a good home over at Darkside with the Death Warrior guys, Defiant Daniel, and that phenomenal team of fighters that have, you know, Dervin Lopez, Gian Herrera's come out of there. You've got Devin Rodriguez. Alon Cruz is a tough dude.
Absolutely.
Marcos Briones. It goes on and on and on. Big Rob Horton. There's so many tough fighters out of that school. And I think a young kid like Brandon Lewis, only being 18, 19 years old, as I think, what, a 5-1 or 6-1 amateur,
6-1,
really has been able to elevate his game, and he's still so young that I think it's hard to. I think he's a close comparison to Sage. I think Sage is a physical specimen. I think it's hard to compare anybody to that kid, but if there's somebody who's very similar, who's following a similar path, it's Brandon Superman Lewis.
I will say this. I can promise you that Brandon Lewis would have not been submitted with a head-arm triangle from half guard like Sage Northcutt. Listen, folks, Arena Fighting Championships comes to you here at our All Sports Arena. This is our first live broadcast. We've got a lot of great sponsors here. MD Crash, No Judges Needed. Cage Zombies is here, Fightrepreneur. Matt Gaither is our man behind the writings, the news. He brings it to you with Cage Zombies. He's just recently started something new with my buddy Sean Walker, and I want him to tell you guys a little bit about it right now.
Well, you know, I've been covering the sport for about 4 years here in Florida. You know, I've been to a lot of the different promotions and shows, and I've seen is the majority of the websites out there are focused on one promotion, and that's, you know, the UFC, and for good reason. They're the top guys in the sport, but ultimately, my opinion and my belief has always been that AFC MMA should get as much coverage as UFC. You know,
Absolutely.
RFC, Breakthrough, World Class, all these promotions should be getting just as much coverage and exposure as the UFC, as World Series of Fighting. Everyone deserves that same equal playing ground. If it's not for these local shows, you're not having fighters fed to the UFC. You know, the UFC is not just going to go out and pick fighters up off the street. They're going to pick fighters up from other promotions that have worked their way up from these amateur shows and the smaller shows. So, you know, I worked for a long time with MMA Madhouse, and we were big on supporting local MMA, and that's really the foundation that was set in me from the beginning of doing this. But I wanted to take it to another level and really focus on all of MMA, support everything with the same even ground. So Sean and I had been somebody that we had known each other mutually. You know, he had been working for another outlet, Brawl Call, for a long time, and been covering
not
events.
to stop you, but Sean Walker's been since the beginning. I've been doing this for a long time, and Sean was actually one of my rolling partners back in Gracie, Tampa, back in the day. So great guy and a great idea.
Yeah, so we've seen each other around for a couple years, known each other, and kept growing closer, and started flirting with the idea like, hey, maybe we could do this on our own. Maybe we could launch our own brand. I felt that I had enough of a following and enough of a foundation set here in Florida that I could launch my own brand, and that's where CageZombies.com came from. So CageZombies.com, we're trying to get out there, support as much of the MMA scene as we can, and that's from here in Newport Richie to in the middle of Malaysia for ONE FC, or in Road FC or UFC or World Series of Fighting. No matter where it is, no matter who the promotion is, we're going to try to give them the best coverage we can. But it's going to start with the Florida MMA scene because that's where both of our passions lie and that's where we live. So we're going to try to promote the Florida scene to the best of our abilities, get them just as much exposure as the big guys do, and we'll see where it takes us.
It's been very successful so far. I loved the Cage Zombie thing in the beginning. I've always listened to the show. I'm very excited to see where this goes for you, man. A lot of congrats to you.
Right on, man.
I want to talk a little bit about Arena Fighting Championships, the officiating and the fighter safety we enforce here. We're sanctioned by Florida Combat Sports and Mitch Miller. We have great judges. We have Devin Rodriguez, who is a professional fighter. We have Brent Munger, who is one of the judges that sticks with us. And we also have Dylan Wood, another professional fighter and official. Heading it up at the helm for referee, we have David Baggett, some of the best officials that you could ask for. I honestly think it's better than some of the stuff we see with the state. Tell us how important you think it is for us to have those well-trained officials.
It's vitally important. It's the most pivotal part of amateur MMA fighting, is having a sanctioning body you can depend on, is having judges that you know are judging what they're watching, unbiased. They know what they're watching first and foremost. They have enough experience under their belts to where if a guy tries to go for an omoplata, or if he tries to slip and transition, just try to do something, the judge isn't going to be bewildered and not know what's going on. They're going to know what's going on. Ultimately, though, there's nobody more important than the referee that's inside the cage with the fighters. David Baggett has grown into being a great ref, done a great job. He's been doing it for a couple years now, reffing, a former professional fighter himself, so he knows above anybody else what things need to look like and how things need to be inside this cage. I know that usually the refereeing is split here between David and between Devin Rodriguez, who do usually pull some double duty. Devin being an active pro fighter, that you can't really get much better than that.
Absolutely.
But that team is one of the best teams of amateur judges in the state. You know, we got a lot of promotions here in the state that work with a lot of different sanctioning bodies. They work with different judges. You've got Baggett, who's done a lot of his learning from the best judge in the state, Ross Kellen. And so you know you're going to see a great, you know he's going to be, the first and foremost, when it comes to the judge, they need to be as active as the fighters.
Absolutely.
That judge doesn't need to be hanging back against the cage. They don't need to be across the cage just kind of chilling and seeing what's going on. They need to be live on the action. They need to be able to be moving and know what's going on to be the first responder. They are the ultimate first responder when it comes to the safety of those fighters. So having a guy like Baggett, having a guy like Devin, who are live on that action, they are right there. They are about as on the fighters as their mouthpieces are.
That's right.
That's the way to go, and that's exactly what needs to happen, especially here in amateur MMA. And fortunately, we've got those great judges here tonight, great referees tonight. And Mitch has been doing this a long time. Used to promote his own show for a while, and he made the transition about a year or so ago, I think, over to the sanctioning body side of things. And I think it's been a great move for him. It might be longer than a year. I might be off on that, but he's been doing this for a little bit while with the Florida Combatives. So it's nice to see him doing that because I think it's a great fit for him.
Well, folks, you heard it. This has been the live beginning show of the Arena Fighting Championships. The lights are changing, the music's changing, the tempo's changing, and it's about the time to get the war out. Big Boy here, you're going to be commentating with Matt Gaither tonight, me, maybe a few other people. Keep watching the live feed. We got more fights to come.